Ithinar's Bloom by H. Jane Harrington. Chapter 23. Some Manner of Ugliness. Cross blades with a man if you must, but beware duelling a woman, for her tongue is sharper than any sword. Master Kezias. Keir had been in many market towns, but they rarely tempted her as much as Byhalia. The festival offered pleasures to tantalize every sense, and despite her initial hesitancy, Keir found herself compelled to venture in. The first assaulting sensation was the variety of alluring aromas. The smell of fresh breads, sweet meats, and spicy liqueurs greeted her, followed by an explosion of sound. Music and laughter abounded, and various street buskers rattled tambourines or blew horns at passing festival-goers. Vaughn and Scylla would pause occasionally to enjoy a juggler, bard, or dancing monkey, and they seemed caught up in the merriment. Even under his mask, Vaughn's glee was evident. As Scylla tossed a coin to a buxom acrobat, Keir leaned over a table to sample a merchant's wares. She spied a particularly handsome dagger, and marveled at the craftsmanship. She had just picked it up to test the heft and balance when the vendor approached and snatched it away. "Oh, my lady," he cooed, "that's no trinket for a delicate flower such as yourself." Scylla, hearing the vendor's comment, guffawed. "Delicate? My good blind sir, whatever about her appearance suggests delicacy?" Keir glared at the bard. The vendor seemed oblivious to the comment, and looked from Keir to Scylla and back again. "Perhaps your beau would prefer to view our selection of exquisite jewels, such as this beautiful specimen, handcrafted by the finest master goldsmiths in Cornea," he said, presenting a gaudy piece of costume jewelry to Keir. Just as she was about to protest the suggestion that she was romantically involved with Scylla, he cackled derisively. "A necklace? She can't kill anyone with a necklace." Vaughn approached and admired the pendant through his mask. "May I?" The vendor placed the item gingerly in Vaughn's outstretched hand. Vaughn took each end of the chain and commenced tugging firmly, much to the merchant's dismay. "Well, it is sturdy enough," Vaughn commented to Scylla. "I think it would suffice for a garret." He turned to the vendor. "How much?" Keir snatched it from Vaughn's grasp. "I prefer my weapon sharp and pointy, thanks." "Don't remind me," Vaughn chuckled, rubbing an imaginary cut on his arm. Keir returned the pendant to the offended merchant and tipped her hat. "We should be moving along lest we miss the play," Scylla reminded them. After pausing for turkey legs and ale, Scylla led them toward the outdoor theater pavilion. When they had purchased tickets and found their seats, Keir scanned the open arena for potential threats. She sensed nothing hostile, but she was alert all the same. Scylla disappeared for a few minutes, then returned with a bouquet of flowers, which he handed to Vaughn. "Only eternal virgins woo empty-handed." Vaughn smiled bashfully and fumbled with gratitude. The play commenced, and Keir found herself wrapped up in the story, despite herself. She had fully intended to grumble dissatisfaction to the men later, but the tragic tale did draw her in. The playwright had done a remarkable job of weaving fiction together with the actual history of the infamous battle at Serenor Valley, which had occurred some 20 years past. Keir especially enjoyed the choreographed fight sequences, phony though they were. The red-headed lead actress could lie the pants off a priest, and Keir could almost imagine Vaughn on the stage acting beside her. The woman was prettier than a field of wildflowers. Keir could understand why men stood at attention at the sight of that full figure and powdered skin. Had she been equipped, she might have joined them in salute. A pang of jealousy gnawed her innards, but she pushed it aside quickly. There had been a time when she had been pursued and adored by handsome noblemen, but that time was long past. Keir had no delusions about what type of woman was preferred by men, and she no longer fit the bill. Normally that thought would not have bothered her, but after watching the actress, Keir yearned, for the briefest of moments, for that feeling again, to be beautiful and soft and revered, to be a woman. Her sudden thrill at the battle sequence erupting on stage reminded Keir how little she could relate to other women anymore. While most ninnies would hunker together to chatter their opinions about costume styles or the handsome actors, Keir would dissect the poorly executed battle techniques of this thespian or that. She chuckled at her own self. Who wanted to feel like a damn ninny anyhow? When the final curtain fell and the audience finished cutting up, Vaughn and Scylla jumped up like their britches were burning. Keir followed close behind, keeping her fist clenched around Vaughn's blue tunic so as not to lose him in the dispersing crowd. They approached the burly sentry at the backstage door. "We are here to pay tribute to Lady Persimmons, if you please. This gentleman is a former colleague." Scilio gestured to Vaughn, who removed his mask. "Name?" Burley asked. "Vaunus Aurelius. Lady Persimmon will remember me from the Grinley Thespian Society," Vaughn provided. The man scribbled something onto a messenger scroll. After a few moments later, a magical reply etched itself across the surface. "She's waitin'," Burley said, opening the door. They entered a corridor which bustled with half-naked actors and busy stagehands. Winding their way through the chaos, they found the dressing rooms reserved for the lead cast members. The name Ambria Persimmons glittered fancifully across the door, and Vaughn rapped briskly to announce his arrival. "Ready and waitin'," a honey-dipped voice called from beyond the door. Vaughn entered first and bowed to the fire-haired woman, seated at a vanity across the flower-laden room. The chamber looked more like a floral shop than a dressing room. The actress dismissed her slave and turned to greet her admirers. "Milady Persimmons, you are as ravishing as ever," Vaughn said, offering his bouquet with a confident flourish. Keir slipped into the room behind the men and was immediately sickened by a nasty perfume that overshadowed the array of floral fragrances. The cloying scent was familiar, long forgotten. It brought back memories of childhood. "Why, Vaunus, it has been ages. To where did you disappear, you lovely boy?" the woman crooned, her Cornian accent thick and syrupy. Keir frowned. She studied the woman, teetering on recognition, but unable to recall where they had met. Vaughn took Ambria's hand and smooched it. "You know actors, lovely lady. We go where the roles are ripe and the muse beckons." Keir was momentarily irritated at Vaughn's interest in the woman. She suddenly had the urge to smack the phony tart across her well-glossed lips. She couldn't fathom why she felt this way. After all, she had thoroughly enjoyed the woman's performance, but something got her dander up about the whole situation. "And who is this handsome scoundrel?" Ambria rose gracefully and greeted Scilio, holding her waiting hand toward the bard for his gesture of appreciation. Scilio smoothly accepted her invitation and moved to introduce himself, before Vaughn could open his mouth. "Milady," he presented, "standing before you is Master Bard Thomas Scilio. I am traveling companion and confidant to our good master Vaunus. It is my highest honor to fall into the lap of a Lokian's chosen flower." Keir rolled her eyes and leaned back against the wall, arms crossed in agitation. Ambria giggled and fanned her face in glee. She was about to speak, when suddenly she noticed Keir, and every ounce of merriment drained from her expression. An icy glare flashed in her green eyes, but was banished quickly. The practised smile returned. "My dear Vaunus, I am aghast that you have lowered your standards since last we shared the pleasures of our company," she said. Vaughn looked puzzled. "I am afraid I don't understand, milady." Ambria sneered. "Not many respectable men would be seen with the scourge of Balinor." Keir's eyes widened as recognition hit with the force of a runaway carriage. Picturing the actress in her mind, she rolled back the years to see a blonde-haired teenager, whose false smile hid a cruel nature. Keir realized that everything about this woman, right down to her name, was manufactured. "A roomy Italiaford. You may have changed your upholstery, but deep down you're still the same overstuffed wench you always were," Keir scoffed. "Actin' suits you. You don't have an authentic bone in your body, and not much that's genuine on the surface either." Vaughn and Scilio toggled back and forth between the two women, frozen in place and uncertain how to act. "And your rags suit you, Kiriana," Ambria said, with a voice as sweet as honeyed poison. "After all, you tattered your own nobility for the honor of your whorish slave." Keir exploded in a rage and launched herself at the woman. Scilio and Vaughn barely managed to restrain her, holding back her anger-driven fists. Ambria screeched and toppled backward over her vanity stool, dramatically weeping in exaggerated hysterics. "Keep that treacherous lunatic away from me!" she screamed. Vaughn and Scilio ushered Keir toward the door. Scilio held her firmly about the waist and wrestled her into the hallway. She was still cursing and issuing swipes at the air over Scilio's shoulder as they hastily exited the dressing room. Ambria, mascara smearing down her cheeks with tears, threw the door open and flung the bouquet at Vaughn's chest. "A cultured man should keep his animals chained," she spat venomously before slamming the door shut. Keir shoved herself free and stormed away, pushing through the lingering actors in the hallway. When she found herself in the open night air, she plopped down on the edge of the empty stage and breathed deeply, quelling angry tears and adrenaline. She removed her hat and kneaded her fingers against tense neck muscles. She should have recognized the woman sooner, but time and cosmetics had transformed Arumia into a thing unfamiliar, but for her mean spirit. Kir had never liked Arumia, even when their mothers had forced them to play together. Arumia proved, as always, adept at finding Kir's weaknesses and exploiting them to her own benefit. In hindsight, she was not surprised that the catty harlot would pinprick the one tender spot that was sure to drive Kir over the edge. Vaughn and Skillio approached cautiously. "Didn't mean to ruin your fun," she said apologetically, wiping away the moisture at the corner of her eye. "She just hit a nerve." Vaughn sat down and placed a hand on Kir's shoulder. "Do you want to talk about it?" Kir shook her head, staring at a hole in her hat. "Another time, Stick. That wound's still too fresh for me to go picking at the scab." Vaughn nodded, eyes fixed on the empty seat in front of him. Skillio sat down on Kir's other side and brushed a stray flower petal from his white cloak. "You know, Vaughn, she wasn't that beautiful in kissing distance. Wipe away all that face paint and I bet she's downright hideous." "Yes, indeed. Her eyes are too close together. And the color reminds me of the slime on fungus. Who likes scum green eyes anyway?" Skillio agreed. "And her nose. Much too colossal for me. Can you imagine the frightful sound when she blows such a honker? It would certainly rouse the dead in complaint." Kir felt a smile creeping across her face. "I bet all that face paint and powder hide some pretty nasty warts and boils." Vaughn shuddered. "Really, Vaughn, I'm surprised you were ever taken in by the likes of her," Skillio tutted. "Although her breasts were rather plump and impressive." "Those are false as well," Vaughn told him. Skillio cocked his head thoughtfully. "Well, some things are forgivable, that being one. However, I don't believe she's my type after all." "Nor mine. I won't lower my standards to keep company with frigid counterfeit strumpets," Vaughn agreed. Kir could see them glancing at her from the corners of their eyes. She bit her lip, trying not to smile, then cleared her throat. "Well, I don't know about you fellas, but I could use a drink. Something hard enough to knock a wildcat on its ass." She hopped down from the stage and slapped her hat back on her head. Skillio and Vaughn rose simultaneously. "For saving us from ourselves, Kir, I treat you tonight," Skillio smiled. "That witch would have used her charms to lure us in for the kill." "I only wish Kir had landed at least one punch," Vaughn commented as they left the arena. "I admit we may have been premature in her restraint. I'm sure a large purple bruise would have improved Ambria's features significantly," Skillio agreed. "Too late now, although if we go back I could oblige," Kir suggested, stopping abruptly. "That's quite all right. I have the image in my head. That will suffice," Skillio said, throwing an arm around her neck in camaraderie and leading her toward a tavern row. "You know, there is one thing a person like Ambria will never learn," Vaughn said thoughtfully. "What's that?" Skillio inquired. "There is some manner of ugliness that makeup simply cannot hide." Kir smiled and felt the last remnants of anger melting away. Their attempt to cheer her had worked. She allowed herself a brief fantasy of Ambria sporting a bloody nose and black eye, and laughed at the image. As she stepped onto the boardwalk in front of the tavern, Kir stopped abruptly. She felt the distinct sensation of being watched, and she glanced over her shoulder. Beyond the festival patrons, a dark-cloaked man leaned against a building, his wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face. He puffed on a cigar, and although she could not see his eyes, Kir knew that the stranger was staring at her. 2 short swords graced a spot on his hip, and his hand rested casually on one. He straightened and doffed his hat to her, then turned toward an alley and disappeared into the crowd. Kir furrowed a brow. There was no immediate sensation of danger, so she turned and entered the tavern. The man was probably a spectator to the festivities. Try as she might, though, she could not exorcise the thought of him.